Hi, everyone, and welcome to our conversation, Extending the Runway, a national analysis of middle school career exploration. I'm Julie Lammers, the Senior Vice President of Advocacy and Corporate Social Responsibility for the national nonprofit American Student Assistance. ASA is a national organization focused on changing the way young people learn about careers and then navigate a path to education and career success. And we're really focused on trying to understand how we can better support young people as they begin their career exploration journey in middle school, understand who they are, what they like, what they want to be in the world, and then help them make decisions and expose them to opportunities to make really informed decisions about what comes next after high school. With us today is Kathleen Mathers. Kathleen is a principal at Education Strategy Group. Kathleen leads the firm's career readiness portfolio focused on college and career pathways as drivers of economic and social mobility. ESG is a mission-driven consulting firm that works with K-12, higher education, and workforce to achieve greater impact in improving student success and advancing equity in the United States. They work with education leaders, employers, design, scale, and strategies to improve long-term outcomes for students throughout the United States. So ASA undertook this work with Education Strategy Group probably about a year ago now to try to understand what the landscape was for career exploration in middle school. We know that middle school is a really important time to start thinking about careers. A study from ECMC found that only about 13% of Gen Z feel that they are prepared to make decisions about their future. And a lot of that is because we are not preparing young people with information at the appropriate time to start acting on the decisions that they need to make. We know that in order to be more prepared for economic and career success, we really need to start these conversations at a much earlier age than they're currently happening now. Obviously, I think everyone knows that as the economy changes, as new careers are being created every day, it seems, all of them, what is the sort of key to all of them is almost all will require some form of education beyond high school. How we're helping young people think about that, what types of education and training they will need, are conversations that are happening far too late in the educational journey currently for young people to make really good decisions about what comes next for them, what they want, what aligns with their long-term career goals, and what is the appropriate path for them. And we believe that middle school is the ideal place to start these conversations because young people at that age are much more open to the idea of exploring opportunities for the future. They are much more likely to have lower degrees of stress when it comes to thinking about the future. And so they are much sort of freer to think broadly and not limit possibilities for themselves. We see that a lot of young people actually begin to foreclose opportunities for themselves if they have not been exposed to those types of activities or understanding of what's an option by the end of middle school. And so we really want to make sure that young people are not limiting their possibilities because they don't know what exists. Middle school students are also at highest risk of disengagement from school. And we know that hands-on learning, personalized learning, connections to real life experiences are a really important way to ensure that young people stay engaged with what's happening in school and connect what they're doing in the classroom to real life. And we also know that that kids that are young people that are exposed to careers earlier in the educational process, there's an increased likelihood of success in transitioning into the high value post-secondary options that we know exist and are required for good jobs. And that's mainly because they've had a longer runway to think about how to get there. What are the types of academic and career experiences they need to align in both middle school and high school in order to be able to make good choices about post-secondary. They have not inadvertently foreclosed opportunities for themselves by not taking certain classes or not being exposed to certain things. They are more likely to be able to rule in and out the types of activities they like and the types of things that they may want to do going forward. And so this experience around how we are exposing young people to career is really critically important. And it is, in our minds, happening far too late in the process. So this work that we undertook with Education Strategy Group is really an effort to say what is happening in the landscape of middle school career exploration policy throughout the country, who's doing it well, where are there opportunities for increased success, and where can we lean in a little bit to understand what's happening, where do we find opportunity to expand policy and practice a little bit more, where are there areas of weakness that we need to either think differently about how we approach things or provide policy recommendations to change, and how do we ensure that there is greater opportunity over the coming years for young people in the middle school space to start thinking more critically about careers in a holistic way, in a way that is not the pet project of one teacher or one school, but that there is widespread understanding that career exploration needs to be an integral part of the middle school experience. So I will turn it over to Kathleen now, and she can share a little bit about what the report said, what we were looking at, and the types of things that we uncovered with this research. So Kathleen?
Thanks, Julie. Thrilled to be a partner with ASA in this work and very glad to join you all today. I want to tell you a little bit about the work that we undertook that Julie's just described at a high level, which was the goal of which was really to uncover and understand at a deeper level, how is middle school career exploration happening across the country in all 50 states and in DC? And in order to do that, we had to kind of organize our thinking into some buckets to be able to unpack what this work looks like. So we approached this work sort of categorically, saying that across states, we want to understand three big priorities. Number one, what is the vision that they bring to this work? Number two, what is the policy environment or the enabling conditions that they've put in place? And number three, what is the infrastructure they've begun to build in order to support quality implementation at a local level? And then across those categories, we had to have a way to sort of describe what we were learning, what we were finding, to be able to pick that picture that more national lens. And so we classified the work. I won't say we evaluated, because we certainly weren't looking at it from that lens, but very much wanted to have sort of a descriptive approach to what we're seeing across the country. And so we came up with sort of three categories to describe that. Number one, that states sometimes are in a building phase of this. This is relatively new or nascent work that they've undertaken, and so they're in the early stages of this. Number two, they may be a little bit more advanced. We would classify them as sort of emerging, that they've got some good things underway, but they're still moving through that continuum. And then number three, we found, of course, a number of states that we would sort of describe as being more advanced in this policy space and really have some different pieces that we would describe at high level of execution. So within those categories, we broke those down into specific criteria or things in particular that we were looking at as sort of indicators of really strong work taking root in quality ways that would enable scale and impact. So within vision, we looked at three things in particular. Number one, do we have a clear definition? Are our states sort of aligned, all the different leaders in the states who are thinking about what does it mean to do middle school career exploration in a quality way? Do we have state leaders who are lifting this up, who are sort of champions of this work and saying this work matters? This needs to be part of a quality middle school experience in service of these broader goals that we're trying to reach through high school, through post-secondary education and training, and ultimately in economic and career success for our learners. And number three, does this work live sort of narrowly within a state education agency, probably because it's pretty nascent? Or do we begin to see evidence that it has stepped beyond the state education agency into advocacy organizations that can really lift up and amplify this work and help become champions and catalysts for the work at large? Within our policy category, we likewise had some different descriptors here. I'd kind of put these into two different buckets. Number one, is the state putting standard practices in place? Is it establishing policies for standard practice so that we get some evenness across implementation statewide? And similarly, Are they putting policies in place that require middle school students to complete particular career exploration activities? We looked through that lens in particular because we want to make sure that what we mean by career exploration for middle school in one place doesn't look and feel wholly different from what it might look and feel like in another place, right? We're looking for equity of experience and opportunity there. And then the second bucket would be sort of a carrot and stick look, if you will. Number one, we know that what matters, what is measured gets mattered, right? So are they building this into accountability systems, whether that's their formal accountability systems, state and federal, or even pulling it into more of their public reporting mechanisms? We know if it gets lifted up and reported publicly, it has greater meaning associated and certainly can drive prioritization across our field. And on sort of the flip side of that, are there incentives in place? So not only are we building it into accountability systems, we're beginning to lean in that direction, but are we creating some incentives that will really drive quality work to happen? And then our third category is our largest bucket that we call infrastructure, which is really taking a look across all the different states to understand what are the pieces they're putting in place? What are they building to support quality implementation? Beyond having a vision, beyond having leadership champion of the work, beyond putting policies in place and expectations for activities, what are they putting in place to enable that work and to happen in a quality way? So we have 6 things in this category, big category. Number one, funding. Is the state providing funding? Are they blending that and supporting that with federal sources as well to support middle school career exploration? Number two, are there material supports? So great if we have standard practice and student requirements, but are there corresponding material supports for those things so that we have all of our counties, our communities across the state doing the same things in similar ways, which gives us much better insight into student participation and impact. Training and professional development. We have a range of professionals across the state who are responsible for this type of work. In many cases, that's counselors at a middle school level. In some cases, we're seeing new positions develop, career advisors, career coaches. There are a range of things that are happening across states. But in any case, those leaders need to be invested in. Their professional development needs to be a priority. How are we providing that training, that professional development to them to improve the quality of implementation that we see? And then 3 other pieces here. Data collection, as we kind of push out in a more forward way, what is the information we should be collecting to get a better understanding on the quality and the impact of this work? And are we collecting that information? And if we are, what are we doing with it? And then stepping a little bit outside of sort of the formal education domain, is the state supporting participation of students in things we call CTSOs, career and technical student organizations, that provide quality experiences like these in career exploration that make a difference to students? And are there other organizations within the state who can lean in and collaborate and play a meaningful role in this work? So at a glance, these are all the different pieces that we were looking at when we did our research. And I want to say that our research sort of took 2 primary buckets, if you will. Number one, certainly a lot of desk research to understand policies, resources, professional development, all of those things. What can we discover through desk research and through interviews with adults to understand state vision, policy, and infrastructure that's been built to this point in time? And then on the flip side of that, what can we learn through student voice about how that work is actually playing out in practice? Really wanted to have some student perspective involved in the work to give us that degree of insight. So starting with that point first, we talked to a number of students across a number of states, ranging in the types of schools that they attended, the states in which they live, gender, race, really tried to have sort of a diverse sample of students with whom we spoke in this work to understand, okay, your state is trying to set all of this in motion. From your perspective, from your experience as a student, how is that actually playing out? What has your experience been? And without oversimplifying, we saw sort of 3 large themes in the feedback from students. Number one, that rather than rely on schools themselves, our students are still very drawn to those with whom they have deep and trusting relationships, like their family, their close friends, relatives, those in their communities with whom they've built strong relationships over the years. And they're relying on those individuals as their source of information on careers instead of relying on schools themselves. So that was finding number one from a student perspective. Number two was a pretty loud theme that emerged across all of our conversations with students, which was that while they have different understandings of career exploration, they all focused on a desire to have authentic, hands-on, work-based experiences to really bring careers to life. They want to really understand a range of careers and what they mean, and have a personal experience with it to have a better understanding of, am I interested in this thing? Am I good at this thing? Is this something I want to learn more about? Is this something I perhaps want to pursue in my own future? And if so, how am I going to get there? So juxtapose that with our third finding here, that in many states we have required, we call them ICAPs, individual career and academic plans, or other form of learning plans that tend to be a little bit more paper pencil driven. And what students told us there on the flip side of we want those authentic experiences was we want less of the paper pencil work. We really want to have those authentic experiences that help us understand in a firsthand way what careers are like. And we want a little bit less of the more compliance-driven activities that we are often told we have to complete, and we kind of complete them once a year and then they don't come back out for us. So big picture, this is what we heard from students. And we'll flavor that a little bit with a couple of direct quotes just to give you a sense of their perspective. So Emma, our 7th grade student in Minnesota, we don't really talk about careers and stuff in school very often. If we do, it's more like a once in a while thing in school. I think I learn a lot more talking to people I know, like in my family, than in school. We have a couple other students as well, really pushing on that importance of hands-on experiences, like Trinity in Minnesota, 6th grader, who told us that I think I would want to see what they do there. What's the most important thing in the job, and what are the rules? What's important to me is trying to figure out what you'll actually do in the job. Contrast that with Paulina, a 7th grader in California, who said, no, we really don't have any opportunities to talk about careers in school. We don't really have any career fairs that happen. So again, just that student perspective that we want to keep in mind as we look at the policy environment of these states to understand the starting point of this work at this moment for middle school career exploration. So again, we did look across all 50 states and DC to understand where they are in terms of their vision, their policy, and their infrastructure. And we had sort of 3 big learnings from this, and then we'll unpack these and give you a perspective on what this looked like on a state-by-state level. So number 1, good news. Even though this is relatively nascent work, most states have identified this as a really important part of middle school education. They've got dedicated funding to support activities. They have some sort of requirements and policy. They've really begun to put pieces in place to move in the direction of quality middle school career exploration. The starting point to that work, in large part, has been paper pencil activities. So interest inventories, checklists of things, templates for career and academic plans. They have largely been sort of desk-driven, classroom-based activities that fall short of helping students have those authentic experiences to really understand the range of careers. We had one student tell us, like, I have an uncle who's an electrical engineer. I know I need to take a lot of math and science for that. I don't really understand what an electrical engineer does. I need to have a more personal experience to understand if that's something I really want to do, or if it's something I'm just putting in a form that the school is asking me to fill out. And then, not surprisingly, because many states are in a more nascent posture in this work, there are a few states that are measuring the quality and the impact of this practice across the country. Few that are collecting data, analyzing it, and looking at what that data says to them in terms of where this work is going well, where it is perhaps falling short of the expectations they've set for themselves, and what they need to do differently to move from sort of an isolated center in a state agency to a strong ecosystem of organizations that can support and drive this work in a quality way with impact at a local level. So big picture, that's kind of the spoiler alert of our report. We want to break it down, though, for you in the categories that we looked at in particular. So starting with state vision for middle school career exploration, let me kind of orient you to how we've approached this. If you're looking at bar graphs here, you've got three colors. You've got light blue that are representing the number of states that we would classify in that building phase. They're very early in the work. They're sort of just getting themselves oriented around this. They're thinking about taking steps. It's becoming important to them, but it's very new. The green bars then represent states sort of in our middle category called emerging. They've got some things in place. They've been able to build a foundation and they're thinking about what they want to do next. And then we've got those states represented by the black bar in our advanced category that have really been able to put some meaningful things in place and are really driving towards greater impact and scale and setting an example of what this work could look like for many other states across the country. So remember, we had three different categories specifically in state vision for middle school career exploration. And you'll see in our first two categories, having a definition clearly defines what we mean by quality middle school career exploration, and having leadership that champions this and says this is a really important part of the middle school experience. Across the board, we saw that our states are in pretty good shape here. Most have identified this as an important part, and most have leaders who are really lifting this up. The flip side of that, if you look at our advocacy organizations, is that most states, 32, don't yet have a state advocacy partner that can help amplify and lift up and champion the importance of this work. So in many cases, the work and the vision for this is living more narrowly in state education agencies and hasn't really begun that scale outside of the state education agency. So that's an opportunity area. If we push a little bit into the policy arena, we looked at this in 4 different ways, and we have some encouraging results here and growth opportunities as well. So in that first bucket I shared with you earlier on requirements for districts and schools, as well as requirements for students, trying to have some uniformity in terms of expectations for those across the state, we found that most states do have policies in place for districts and schools, and over half of the states require students to document their career exploration activities. So we've got a nice, healthy, advanced category here. And by contrast, if we flip down and look at accountability, you can see the colors and the size of the bars change. Suddenly, we only have 7 states that are explicitly trying to tie this work to their federal or state accountability systems. Again, not a big surprise because this is a fairly new space. We have 7 that have moved strongly in that direction, 36 that are pushing that way, and only 8 that we would say are in the very early stages, but certainly a growth opportunity for the states overall. And then related to that, we have about half of our states that are in the building phase for incentives that they can put in place to really drive prioritization of this work. And the other half of our states sort of split mostly in the advanced category for really having some strong work underway there already. And then our third category is our infrastructure bucket. Remember, this is our big bucket. We had 6 different things we were looking at here, and this was our attempt to kind of lift the hood and get a closer look at beyond the policy, beyond the vision, beyond those sort of big pieces. What is the building that's happening to support quality implementation at a local level? And you'll notice we've got sort of 3 leaders here at the top in terms of supports, organizations, and funding that look really strong across states. Most states do have material supports that they are making available to their local counterparts to support those student activities that are required. Most do have some dedicated funding to facilitate this. And many have organizations with whom they're partnering in this work. So they're finding collaborators. They're finding that they don't have to do this work themselves, and they are actively initiating those partnerships to support this work beginning to happen at a middle school level. Where we begin to see that picture change a little bit is in the training category. You'll notice here the blue bar gets a little bit bigger. And the idea behind training, of course, is that if we have these expectations, if we have some standardization around what we're asking districts and schools to do and what we're asking students to do, can we likewise provide training, provide professional development for those leaders who are responsible for executing against those expectations? And we have about half of our states that we would say doing a great job. They're in the advanced category, really moving that forward. And then we have about half of our states that are in more nascent stages of that work. And then our final two categories are CTSOs. Those are our career technical student organizations. We have a number of states, more than half of our states in the emerging category. They're pushing strongly in that direction, and about 14 in our advanced category. But again, an area that we could probably push harder to get more states in the upper end of that continuum. And wanted to end this by saying, again, data collection here is a weak point, right? Which makes sense because we didn't see a whole lot really pushing this into their accountability systems yet. We'll say that word yet. And so they haven't really given as much intentional thought around, okay, we're asking them to do all of these things. What are the data pieces that we need to collect? Who needs to collect those? How do we analyze those? How can we draw meaning from those to make decisions about changes to make in policies, in practices, in the infrastructure that we're building? So big area there that we want to push on in terms of really growing this work. So it's helpful to look at that from sort of a blunt perspective across the country and give you an example or a feel for what that looks like across all states. Sometimes it's helpful to bring it to life a little bit too with some real examples. So if we push over to our state vision research and sort of step back and say, who's doing this work especially well? There are a number of places doing this well, but we would lift up Delaware in particular as a state that's really leading in this space. If you're familiar with Delaware, you know that they've had their Pathways Initiative in place for quite some time. And this has been a statewide charge. They've had big champions behind this work, including the Secretary of Education, the state CTE director, and really driving that Pathways Initiative to not begin in high school, but to start in middle school. And that career exploration needs to be a core piece of that. Also, the governor has created there the Central Delaware Career Expo for middle school students, which is a very big step in the direction of providing some authentic hands-on experiences for students across a range of careers to have personal conversations, to ask questions, to get an understanding of what various careers look and feel like and what they might be interested in doing. Delaware also has a career exploration definition in their work-based learning manual that not only defines career exploration activities, but also provides some accompanying examples that really brings this to life. So again, on the infrastructure side, kind of pushing in that direction. And they have an incredible advocacy partner in their friends at the Rodell Foundation with whom they've worked closely for a number of years. And together they have offered a curriculum that spans middle and high school to help students really think about what they're doing after high school. What does life look like? How do they move along that path to economic and career success? If we step back and think about this through the policy lens, lots of states doing great work. Pennsylvania sort of rises to the top. It's a state that has a lot of different pieces in place already and frequently found itself in sort of our advanced category as we were describing posture in this space. So from a standards perspective, they actually have standards. Yay, right? Career education and work standards that outline competencies for career awareness and preparation. And those standards require eighth graders to develop a career portfolio. So again, really thinking about the state as a whole, they have many, many districts in the state of Pennsylvania. And so they're trying to think about, we want this experience to be similar for students in the north part of our state as the south part of our state, from east to west, really trying to put those expectations in place. Bookend that with, here are the standards, here are the expectations, this is what we want delivered. We also have this built into both accountability and we're supporting with incentives. So on the accountability side, they have middle school career exploration built into both their state and federal systems. So their state system being their Future Ready Pennsylvania Index, as well as their ESSA plan. So remember, we only had about 7 states in that advanced category. Pennsylvania is one of them. And then last but certainly not least, they have created financial incentives for middle schools to incorporate this. So not just kind of that stick mentality, if you will, that this is in the accountability system, you must do it, but also providing financial incentives to say, and here are some resources to help you do this work well. And then if we look at this from an infrastructure perspective, again, lots of states doing great work here. Washington stands out as one that is really strong in moving in this direction. If you're familiar with Washington, you're probably familiar with their Career Connect work. One of the things that's unique about Washington is that they require, as a graduation requirement, the high school and beyond plan. So all of your students starting in middle school are thinking about that plan. What am I going to do with high school? What is my long-term aspiration and ambition? And what is my plan to be able to get there? Washington provides funding to support all of those related pieces, from their career planning platform to their career bridge to their career launch programs to their Career Connect learning coordinators. That word Career Connect is going to appear a lot with our friends in Washington. They are also collecting data. They're reporting annually on what that Career Connect work looks like. And they are collecting data on implementation of that high school and beyond plan. So they're trying to make that not just a pencil paper activity that they look at sort of defined points in time, but to make that a living document that changes over time, and to collect information and reflect on that and make changes that will help students move forward in their future plans. And then another example around Washington is that they have begun really important, rich partnerships to help them with their work. So starting with West Sound STEM Network is one example, pairing STEM professionals with groups of middle school students to really get them together and understand, like, as an employer, as a STEM professional, this is what I do. This is what my job is like. This is what the opportunities are in front of you. So starting that work really early to get not only information to students, but to begin building relationships and begin building networks that can help students as they think about their own planning moving forward. So if we put that all together, the takeaways seem to be that headline, right? States have a relatively strong starting point in this work. There's a lot of good work that's happening in terms of having a unified definition in a state education agency of what we mean by this work, beginning to put policies in place to say these are our expectations around activities that students need to do and schools and districts need to support, and infrastructure that needs to be built surrounding that. There are significant opportunities for growth and improvement as well, namely that we have to begin pushing past more of a sort of paper pencil, what's the information I can easily collect mentality, into more of an authentic activity-based set of experiences for kids that give them an authentic experience to understand careers and get a sense of what they want to do and how they're going to get there. And of course, also to think about, how are we going to measure this? It's not enough to lift this up as a priority. We've got to have an understanding of how well are we doing this? What do we need to shift and grow and change about this work? If our ultimate goal is to drive economic and social mobility among our learners, this is one very important mechanism to do that. And so the reflection, the data collection, the inclusion and accountability has to become a higher priority. Absent that, there is a risk of making this more of a series of paper pencil activities that falls short of what we're trying to ultimately achieve. So what does that mean we need to do next? If we kind of look around the corner, we can look at this both from a state perspective and a local perspective. What are the things that states need to do sort of strategically here? Not sort of, definitely strategically, right? Number one, that clear vision, that definition that they put in place, that's a great starting point. That needs to grow. We need to have alignment between that definition and a broader vision of what we're trying to do broadly for students. How do we align what our definition is for middle school career exploration with what we're relatedly trying to do in high school, connected to post-secondary education and training, and ultimately to economic and workforce development? We're trying to put our students on that path, need to have that aligned vision, which means we have to collaborate across state agencies. There needs to be a shared vision for success, and frankly, probably some shared accountability for results, working towards those more ambitious goals with dedicated funding and policies and supports. Second piece is facilitating the quality experiences, right? That gets to the point about moving past paper pencil and sort of compliance-driven activities that we do at defined points in time across a year, and really pushing into more of those authentic work-based experiences that allow for deeper exploration among students, setting those clear expectations in place for elementary, middle, high school, and again, how they connect to each other. and can't overlook the importance of providing funding and supports to drive that work and support that work. So the training that we talked about, all the different professionals who are leading this work, that could be teachers, that could be counselors, that can be the career coaches. They need some deeper support around what are we trying to do and how are we trying to do it? What are the resources that are available? What can I tap into? How do I really do this in a more impactful way? And again, thinking about all the different funding resources that are available. There are state and federal and oftentimes philanthropic resources that can be braided together that then have greater opportunity to be used than if they're just left in their individual funding streams. And then last but not least, I know we've harped on this a bit today, but monitor and incentivize progress, right? Don't stop on the input side, really think about the output, the outcome side. What are the results that we're hoping to achieve? Goes back to our clear vision. How are we going to know if we've achieved those results? What's the data we need to collect? What are the systems we need to put in place to collect that? And how do we publicly report on that? How do we give some sightline to the different stakeholders? We want to build this ecosystem of organizations across the country that are supporting and participating in this work. They need to have an understanding of what we're doing and how well it's going as well. So that's from a state perspective. We also, of course, have a local perspective. What are the opportunities for our local leaders? Number one, outlining middle school career exploration as a priority. This work is largely starting at a state level and lifting up the importance of it, and it's filtering down to a local level. We need to facilitate that and help our local leaders understand that there are tools they can already leverage, their district strategic plan, their school improvement plans, their Perkins plans. Those are sort of ready-made opportunities to build middle school career exploration in and say, this is going to be a core driver of our middle school experience. We're really going to make this a driving priority moving forward. Build partnerships and support collaborations. Remember, they don't have to do this work alone. We know how busy schools are. We know how busy districts are. They have many things on their plates. We don't call them plates anymore. I think they're more aptly described as platters. Overflowing with lots of different things, right? There are local intermediaries. There are employer-facing organizations. There are community-based organizations that can become not only champions of this work, but collaborators in this work. So who are those additional resources? How do we build that broader ecosystem so that we can get students that broader range of experience? If we don't have that ecosystem built, we'll continue to rely on a more paper-driven, paper, pencil, compliance-driven sort of set of activities to drive this work. And then again, leverage their federal and state grant programs, Perkins, ESSA, Title I and ESSA Title I and Title IV, IDEA, WIOA youth activities. These can all support middle school career exploration. A lot of times our local leaders need that clarification and they need that encouragement to use those resources in that way. And then, of course, collecting data. What guidance and support can we give them around the data that needs to be collected, including feedback from stakeholders? Continue to talk to students, talk to their parents, talk to the teachers, right? The range of stakeholders who can help us gain an understanding of how this work is going and important shifts that we want to make in this work to improve can't be overstated. So I want to close by kind of wrapping this with the most important part, student voice. Going back to Trinity, our 6th grade student in Minnesota, to kind of pull pieces together and say, I think I would want to see what they do there. What's the most important thing in the job and what are the rules? What's important to me is trying to figure out what you'll actually do in the job. Wise young voice, 6th grade in Minnesota, that really pulls these different pieces together and provides some encouragement for what we want to do and where we want to go next. So, Julie, thank you for the opportunity to share this information today. It's been a pleasure to work with ASA, and we look forward to seeing where we go next to really drive this forward.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you have specific questions on the research or the work that ASA and ESG are doing together, you can reach out to us at advocacy@asa.org. Really appreciate Kathleen's insight and input on this. I think what we are seeing is that there is a large way to go between policy and practice when it comes to middle school career exploration. We have to acknowledge the fact that there might be a lot of good policy in place, but how it's translating for our young people is not really what we envision the experience for them to be. And so we're excited about the opportunities to come and areas of growth as we think more critically, but how we ensure young people have access to career exploration at an earlier age to ensure long-term success and economic mobility. So thank you to Kathleen and the ESG team for all of your insights and hard work on this. And we appreciate everyone joining us today. Thanks very much.